From ancient scrolls to modern classics, welcome to Whispers of Japanese Tales.
Firebird by Osamu Dazai. This is the preface, recounting the time before actress Sashio Takano became an actress. It is an old story. Suzuki Otohiko entered a second-hand clothing shop and asked, "Do you have a plain black haori here? If you're fine with serge, we do." It was October 20th, Showa 5, 1930. The leaves of Tokyo's street trees were starting to scatter in the wind. Is serge still acceptable for now? It wouldn't be odd even after it gets much colder, as long as it's plain black. Alright, show it to me. Is it for you to wear? The customer wore a cap tilted casually and a student uniform with frayed cuffs. That's right, the plain serge haori handed to him was swiftly put on over the student uniform. Isn't it too short? He asked. He was a university student, about 5 feet 7 inches tall, thin, and lanky. For a serge haori, slightly shorter actually looks more stylish. Stylish, huh? How much is it? He bought the haori. Now, his preparations were complete. A few hours later, Suzuki Otohiko was standing in front of the Imperial Hotel in Uchisaiwaicho. He was dressed in a fine gray striped-lined kimono, paired with a plain black serge haori. He pushed the door open and entered. "Can I rent a room? For an overnight stay, sir?" "That's right." He decided to rent a single bedroom with a bath for 2 nights. His only possession was a single rattan cane. He was shown to his room. Upon entering, he immediately opened the window. It overlooked the backyard. A large chimney, resembling that of a crematorium, stood in the view. The sky was overcast. The guardrail of the provincial railway line was visible. With his back turned to the attendant, Suzuki Otohiko continued gazing out the window and said, "Coffee," and then, he paused mid-sentence and remained silent for a moment. Suddenly, he turned around to face the attendant. "Well, never mind, I'll head out to eat." "Ah, wait," Otohiko called out to the attendant. "I'll be staying for 2 nights. He took out a 10-yen bill and pressed it into the attendant's hand. "Pardon?" The attendant, a man nearing 40 with a slightly hunched back, carried himself with an air of refinement. Otohiko smiled. "Thank you for your care. Much appreciated." The attendant, whose dignified face resembled a mask, flashed a fleeting polite smile and bowed in response. Otohiko stepped outside and, swinging his cane, strolled aimlessly toward Abiya. It was twilight. The air was slightly chilly. Wearing unfamiliar felt-soled sandals, he seemed to have difficulty walking. Abiya. Tsukiyabashi, Owari-cho. This time, dragging his cane along the ground, he walked through Ginza. He looked at nothing in particular, his gaze blank, as though staring at the horizon. Wandering aimlessly like fallen leaves carried by the wind, he staggered into Shiseido. Inside Shiseido, the lights were already on, and it was pleasantly warm. He slowly drank a cup of hot coffee. He ate 2 slices of a sandwich and stopped there. He left Shiseido. Night had fallen. This time, with his cane slung over his shoulder, Otohiko wandered aimlessly. On a whim, he stepped into a bar. "Welcome," came the greeting. He sat down on a sofa in the corner. Letting out a deep sigh, he covered his face with both hands. Suddenly, as if snapping out of it, he raised his head confidently and murmured in a low voice, "Whiskey," with a faint smile. "Which whiskey would you like?" "Anything. Something ordinary will do." He drank 6 glasses in quick succession. "You're quite strong, aren't you?" 2 women were sitting on either side of him. "Am I?" Otohiko had turned slightly pale and said nothing more. The women appeared at a loss for what to do. "I'm leaving. How much is it?" "Wait," said the short-haired woman sitting on his left, lightly pressing down on Otohiko's knee. "This is troublesome. It's raining." "Rain?" "Yes. There are strange moments in life when 2 complete strangers, a man and a woman who have just met, leap over all caution, shyness, and pretense, and engage in a vague, meandering conversation. It's so annoying. Every time I wear this collar and go out to the shop, it always rains," she said. Glancing at it, he saw an old-fashioned collar of pale yellow crepe, embroidered with silver threads forming pampas grass and a pattern of geese in flight. "Hope it clears up." Gradually, pretense and formality began to return. "Yes, it must be hard with those sandals. All right, let's drink." That night, the 2 of them stayed at the Imperial Hotel. In the morning, the middle-aged attendant quietly entered the room, froze for a moment, then smiled gently. Otohiko also smiled and said, "The bath?" "At your convenience." Coming out of the bath, Sashio Takano had healthy, sun-kissed cheeks. Otohiko made a phone call. It was a call demanding someone to come immediately. Before long, the door swung open with force, and a young man in a suit entered, his radiant smile lighting up the room like a flower in full bloom. "Otoyan, you're such a fool," he said, glancing at Sashio. "Hello." "That thing." "Oh, I brought it." The young man pulled a black box from his inner pocket and said, "If everyone drinks this, it'll kill them." "I can't sleep, you see," Otohiko said with an ugly smile. "There are better drugs available, you know," the young man said. "Take the day off," Otohiko replied. The young man worked in the research lab of a university medical school. "Why don't we have some fun?" The young man exchanged a glance with Sashio, and they both laughed. "I already skipped work to come here." The three of them left the hotel, hailed a car, and went to Asakusa. They watched a review. Otohiko sat a little apart from them. "Hey," Sashio whispered to the young man. "Is he always that quiet?" Sashio asked. The young man laughed cheerfully. "No, he seems to be like that only today." "But I like him," she said. The young man blushed. "Is he a novelist?" "No." "An artist?" "No." "I see," Sashio murmured, nodding to herself. She pulled her red scarf tightly around her neck and buried her chin into it. After watching the review, the three of them walked outside and went into a quiet chicken restaurant. In a tranquil tatami room, they gathered around a table and drank sake. The three of them seemed like siblings bound by blood. "I'll be going on a trip for a while," Otohiko said to the young man in a tone so gentle that Sashio was surprised. "You can't rely on me anymore. You're a man who needs to make something of himself. Being filial to your parents is, in itself, a noble purpose for living. People aren't capable of doing everything, one thing after another. If you endure, remain humble, and live modestly, you'll find that the world isn't such a cruel place. You need to believe that. Today, the young man said, his beautiful face showing a hint of a tearful expression, acting strange. "No," Otohiko said, shaking his head childishly. "That's fine. Don't imitate me. You're someone who can hold your pride much higher. You're worthy of that." 19-year-old Sashio reverently poured sake into the young man's cup until it was brimming. "Let's go. This is goodbye." They parted ways in front of the restaurant. The young man stood with his hands in his pockets, looking forlorn as he watched the two of them leave, standing amidst the autumn wind. When the two were alone, Sashio said, "You're going to die, aren't you?" "You can tell?" Otohiko replied, smiling faintly. "Yes, I'm so unfortunate," Sashio said. Just when she thought she had finally found someone, he was no longer truly of this world. "Can I say something foolish?" "What is it?" "Won't you stay alive? I'll do anything. No matter how hard it is, I'll endure it." "It's no use." "I see. I'll die with him. I have seen happiness for one night." "I said something silly, didn't I? Do you despise me?" "I respect you," Otohiko replied slowly, tears glistening in his eyes. That night, the two of them took the drug in their room at the Imperial Hotel. They sat neatly side by side on the sofa, their bodies growing cold. Late at night, the middle-aged attendant discovered them. He had suspected this outcome. Calmly, he slipped out of the room and quietly woke the manager. Everything was handled in complete silence. The hotel as a whole remained peacefully asleep until morning. Suzuki Otohiko was completely lifeless. The woman survived. Sashio Takano was born in the mountains of Ashu. She inherited the noble blood of her ancestors. Her great-grandfather was a doctor. Her grandfather was one of the Byakutai warriors and died young. His younger sister succeeded the family estate. She was Sashio's mother, a dignified and expressionless woman. She took in an adopted son. He was an art teacher at a girls' school. He was the second son of a sake brewer in a neighboring town, 8 ri over the mountain pass. He was weak both in body and spirit. The Takano family owned a small piece of land. Even after quitting his job as a teacher at the girls' school, they were able to make a living. He roamed the mountains with a dog and a rifle. "I want to create great paintings. I want to become a great artist." That longing burned deep within his heart, yet he remained silent, weighed down by his timid nature. Sashio Takano grew up amidst the mountain mist and echoes of the forest. She loved walking through the dense fog at the bottom of the valleys. She thought to herself, the depths of the ocean must surely look like this. The year Sashio graduated from elementary school, her father returned to his teaching position at the girls' school in the neighboring town. It was to secure the funds needed for Sashio's tuition. Sashio applied to the same girls' school where her father worked and was accepted. At first, she and her father stayed at his family's home, commuting to school together each morning. However, his family began to criticize this arrangement, saying it was improper for an educator. Her timid father quickly agreed without argument, and Sashio was placed in the dormitory of the girls' school. Her mother remained alone, living in their house in the mountains. Among the students, Sashio's father was nicknamed Yuri and was not particularly respected. Sashio was nicknamed Wanasu, eggplant. The name came from being seen as the eggplant on the vine of Yuri, gourd. In fact, Sashio had a dark complexion. She firmly believed she was extremely unattractive. "I'm ugly, so I must at least work on being a good person," she thought, making a determined effort. She was always the class leader. Except for art, she scored over 90 points in every subject. In art, however, she would receive 60 points, and occasionally as high as 73 points. These scores were the result of her timid father's grading. In the autumn of Sashio's 4th year, her father, unusually, gave her drawing of cosmos flowers a grade of excellent. Sashio found it strange. When she turned the charcoal paper over, she discovered a small note in her father's handwriting in the corner. "Women should be gentle, never bully the weak." She was struck with a sudden realization. And then, her father quietly disappeared. Some said he had fled to Tokyo to study art. Others speculated there had been some issue between him and Sashio's mother, or perhaps between her mother and his family. Some even whispered that he had a mistress. Various rumors reached Sashio's ears in hushed tones. Not long after, Sashio's mother took her own life. She used her father's hunting rifle to shoot herself in the throat, dying instantly. The wound split open like a pomegranate. Sashio was left alone. Her father's family took on the responsibility of protecting her person and property. Leaving the dormitory of the girls' school and returning to her father's family, Sashio underwent a sudden and dramatic change. It was the mysterious resolve unique to a 17-year-old. On her way home from school, she casually stopped by the train station, bought a ticket to Ueno, and boarded the train still wearing her sailor-style school uniform. Tokyo was waiting for Sashio. As soon as it embraced her, it sneered and tossed her about. Like a discarded tissue, Sashio was thrown around and worn down. She lived for 2 years. She was utterly exhausted. Prepared to meet her end, Sashio, without shame, wore her mother's only keepsake, a very old collar, and stepped out to work at the shop, so desperate had her circumstances become. It was then that Otohiko Suzuki appeared. At first, when she slowly regained consciousness, she felt as though she had been tightly cradled in a man's arms. She seemed to remember clinging to those arms with all her strength, crying out loudly, wailing uncontrollably. She also had the impression that the man had sobbed quietly alongside her. "You must live strongly, even if it's just you." Those were the words she thought she had heard. Who was it? She couldn't quite recall. It surely couldn't have been her father. Could it have been that young man she had parted with in Asakusa? In any case, it was just a vague memory shrouded in mist. When she became fully conscious, she realized she was in a hospital. "You must live strongly, even if it's just you." The voice suddenly resurfaced in her mind, and she nodded coldly to herself, thinking, "Ah, that person must have died." Witnessing the unchanging, iron-like grip of misfortune that continued to adhere stubbornly to her life, Sashio felt an unsettling calmness, as if resigned to the thought, "This is always how it is for me." She soon realized that 2 uniformed police officers were standing guard outside the door. What were they planning to do? The chilling sense of foreboding sent a shiver through her. Then, with a loud commotion, 6 men in suits entered Sashio's hospital room. "Suzuki made a phone call from the hotel, didn't he?" "Yes," she replied with a pitiful smile. "You know who he called, don't you?" She nodded. "And who was it?" "A young person." "Their name?" "I don't know." The murmuring of the gentleman filled the room with hushed whispers. "Very well, you'll be coming to the Metropolitan Police Department with us right away. You should be able to walk, I assume." She was placed in a car. Looking out the window at the streets, she saw people hunching their shoulders against the cold, walking busily. "Ah, so many people are alive," she thought. She was put in a detention cell and left there for 3 days without any explanation. On the morning of the 4th day, she was called into the interrogation room. "Well, it seems you really didn't know anything. How ridiculous. You're free to go." "Yes. You're free to go. From now on, be careful. Live properly." As she staggered out of the interrogation room, she saw that young man standing in the dim hallway. Sashio gave a faint smile, then suddenly burst into tears and threw herself into the young man's chest. "Let's go home. I don't understand what's going on at all," he said. It was him. The hazy memory from her time in a stupor resurfaced. At that moment, she had been firmly held by this man. She nodded and gently pulled herself away from his chest. When they stepped outside, the sunlight was dazzling. The two walked silently along the moat. I don't even know how to begin, the young man said, lighting a cigarette. He gave a small shake of his head. Anyway, I was really shocked, he added, clearly agitated. I'm sorry. No, it's not about that. Well, that was a big deal too, but more than that, about Otoyan, Mr. Suzuki. You don't know anything about him either, do you? I know. Oh? He passed away, she began, but tears ran down her cheeks before she could finish. That's not what I mean, the young man said solemnly, tightening his lips as he stared straight ahead. That alone is a terrible blow for both of us, but, he tossed his cigarette away. More than that, there's something else, Mr. Suzuki, it seems, did something extraordinary. Your involvement with him hasn't even made it into the newspapers yet. It seems like there's some kind of publication ban on it. They've been investigating both you and me very thoroughly. I've been through hell because of it. They interrogated me relentlessly. Apparently, you only met him for the first time 2 days ago. And as for me, I've known him since we were children. We're relatives. I used to play with Otoyan when we were little, and I really liked him. He paused for a moment. A surge of sobs welled up within him like a sudden gust of wind, but he managed to suppress it. At last, they've realized that we really didn't know anything, and so we've been temporarily released. Temporarily, mind you. From now on, it seems we'll be summoned whenever something new comes up, so you need to be prepared for that. You're still not fully recovered, physically. I've taken full responsibility for you and officially taken you under my care. I'm sorry, she said again, her apology barely audible, as though it might vanish into the air. No, it doesn't matter about me, the young man said, but as he spoke, recalling the anguish he had endured over the past week, he grew noticeably irritated. What will you do from here? Will you come to my lodging? Or perhaps... By then, they had already reached the front of the Imperial Theater. I'll return to Irafuneko. Sashio had rented a room on the second floor of a hairdresser's house in the alleyways of Irafuneko. I see, the young man replied in a businesslike tone, his irritation now apparent. I'll escort you. He hailed a car, and the two got in. Will you be staying there alone? Sashio didn't answer. She felt a strange sense of humiliation at his casual question, and a different kind of tears of frustration, welled up inside her. Still, she reconsidered and managed a sorrowful smile. This man knows nothing. He has no idea how wretched and painful our lives truly are. This spoiled boy understands nothing at all. As that thought crossed her mind, her smile froze in place and, little by little, transformed into the sinister grin of a demon. A man, there are as many as you like. Sashio wanted to answer in that way. For a woman who is ashamed of her ugliness but is told by others that she is beautiful, such a person is truly miserable. Frightened and intimidated by the sound of the wind, or by the cries of cranes, one must continue battling a ridiculous sense of guilt for a lifetime. Takano Sachio was not beautiful. Yet men were fervent. The devils whisper that even a spiritual woman, even a woman who is like a religion, can be controlled through her body often turns men into fools. At that time in Tokyo, a weary kind of lust was in vogue among a group of men, treating everything as the female body. They would imagine the Mona Lisa naked, think about Masaoka's husband, or reduce Jeanne d'Arc and Higuchi Ichio to mere embodiments of femininity. Such extreme and polar lust could be described, so to speak, as a kind of nihilism. And yet, nihilism has no depth or shallowness. It is always shallow. That much is certain. Around Sashio, countless men gathered like swarming pale cockroaches. For a lone woman to live in the center of such a circle, earnestly dreaming of realizing some kind of midday flame, this was truly wretched. What do you think? Are all humans the same, I wonder? After some thought, she tried saying such a thing. I think each person is different, every single one of them. Is it psychological, or physiological? The young medical student responded with a formal expression, as if answering a school exam. No, I'm not being pretentious. I was just trying to act a little refined. She laughed shrilly, so brightly that it was hard to believe she had been crying a little while ago. Her teeth gleamed like ice. Beautiful. Crossing that bridge, they would arrive at Arifune-cho. Why don't you stop by? I'm a barmaid. When we entered the room, Zenkoji Tsukushiro was sitting cross-legged in the middle of it. He exchanged glances with the young man, and Zenkoji immediately broke into a servile, sneering laugh. You were surprised too, weren't you? Even I was utterly stunned. Sashio-kun, you see, is always doing things like this without a care, and it's quite troubling. When the news reached the office, I rushed straight to the hospital, only to find this young lady here bawling her eyes out. I had no idea what was going on. And then, before I knew it, An article embargo came down from the Metropolitan Police Department. Do you know about Suzuki Otohiko? Turns out, he's not just some common rat. He's black terrorism. He even went so far as to rob a bank. The young man, who had been standing dejectedly in the corner of the room, asked, "Are you sure about this?" His face had turned pale. "I imagine the article will be released in another 5 or 6 days, Zenkoji replied. He worked for a newspaper company. Sashio quietly drew open the window curtains. I had cried in the hospital, held in the arms of this Zenkoji Tsukushiro. When did you get here? She asked in a cold tone. Me? He flushed suddenly, his round face, reminiscent of the late Okura Kiichiro, turning red as he smiled shyly like a child. Just a little while ago. When I called the Metropolitan Police early this morning, they told me you two had been released, so I came here to check on you. The landlady downstairs was worried, you know. Apparently, detectives came by repeatedly while you were out and turned this room upside down. I smoothed things over with her for you. Well, have a seat." He glanced up at Sashio's face with a gentle smile. "I'm so glad. Really. I'm so glad you're safe." His eyes welled up with tears. Sashio placed one hand on the desk and sat down as if collapsing. "Not good at all. Do you have a cigarette? Oh my, whenever I see your face, I suddenly crave a cigarette." "Well, that's quite the greeting," Tsukushiro said, though he seemed delighted nonetheless. "I should take my leave," said the young man, who had been leaning lightly against the sliding door, standing there the entire time. "Is that so?" Sashio looked up at the young man with a blank expression, exhaling a puff of cigarette smoke. "Take care of yourself. I've taken responsibility for you. For Suzuki-san's sake, stay strong. I believe in Otoyan. No matter what happens, I'll continue to support him." "Well then, I'll come by again sometime." "Thank you for today," she replied in a sharp, almost brusque tone. Lowering her face, she softly bit her lower lip. Without standing to see the young man off, she remained still, her face cast downward. After the sound of the young man's footsteps descending the stairs had faded, Sashio suddenly raised her face and said, "Tsukushiro, I'll stay with you. No matter what happens, I won't leave you." "Don't say that," Tsukushiro replied, unusually stern. "I'm not that much of a fool." He stood abruptly and went after the young man. "Hey, wait. He finally caught up with him in front of the Shintomiza Theater. "There's something I want to talk to you about." The young man turned around and looked at him. "I don't hate you. I like you." "Come now, don't say that," Tsukushiro replied with a smirk. But when he saw the young man standing gracefully beneath the street trees, his figure as beautiful as a painting, Tsukushiro couldn't help but grow serious. "What a handsome man," he thought. "There's something I'd like to talk to you about. It won't take long. Would you mind keeping me company? I mean," he hesitated, "I like you." They entered Miyoshino. "Suzuki Otohiko, he's a relative of yours, isn't he?" Tsukushiro's speech alternated chaotically between formal and casual, addressing him as you and you in different tones. "He's my cousin," the young man replied, sipping hot milk. He hadn't eaten anything since the morning. "What kind of man is he?" Tsukushiro asked earnestly. He's our," the young man stammered. "A hero?" Tsukushiro asked, with a wry smile. "No, a lover, the sustenance of my soul." Those words struck Tsukushiro deeply. "Ah, that's wonderful." Having risen from a life of poverty, Tsukushiro realized it had been 10 years since he'd heard words with such pure resonance. "I'm 28 this year. Since I was 17, I've been working as a servant, learning only to doubt people. You're so fortunate." He fell silent. "We're just posing," the young man said. His left eye was bloodshot from lack of sleep. "But even behind a pose, there is life. A cold facade is the highest form of love. I always felt that way when I looked at Suzuki-san." "I have my own sustenance for life too," Tsukushiro said in a low voice, strangely familiar, as he studied the young man's face intently. "I'm aware of that. I have nothing to say. I've always been a lowly man. At most, just a single body, only a body." He started to say but suddenly stopped, then leaned forward intently. "What do you think of that woman?" "I think she's a pitiable person," the young man answered coolly, as if he had prepared the reply beforehand. "Is that all?" "No, I mean, just between us, don't you feel something strange, something peculiar?" The young man's face flushed. "There, you see," Tsukushiro said, sticking out his lower lip and grinning slyly. "That's right, it's exactly as I thought, but you're still better off. It's been just 1 day for you. For me, it's been close to a year, 365 days. That's right, I've suffered under that woman 365 times more than you have. No, the fault isn't hers. It's something she doesn't even know about. The fault lies within me, in my own vile blood. Laugh at me if you want. I want to triumph over her. I want her body completely. That's all it is. She has despised me so terribly, hated me so much. But I have my own resolve. One day, I'll have her bear my child. A girl as beautiful as a jewel. What do you think of that? It's not revenge. I don't think of something as petty as that. This is my love. The ultimate expression of love. Just imagining it makes my chest feel like it's being torn apart. It's driving me insane. Do you understand what we lowly people mean when we say such things? As he rambled on, his lips changed color. White foam gathered at the corners of his mouth, and his face began to look almost villainous. I'll forgive this thing with Suzuki Otohiko, just this once. I'll let it go. I know full well the ridiculous position I'm in right now. My guts are boiling with rage, and that's no exaggeration. But I can't help it. I'm hopelessly in love with a woman who despises me. A woman so full of vain pride. She's as beautiful as a butterfly. It's fate, isn't it? Let her be as vain as she pleases. What do you think? Would you continue spending time with her, playing with her? That's a request from me. Not out of self-abasement. No, it's because I've always admired noble people. I respect them. And you're truly remarkable. This isn't sarcasm or bitterness. I mean it. If she quietly spends time with someone as good as you, there's no doubt about it. She'll become even weaker, more fragile, and more beautiful. I'm certain of that. Drawl fell onto the table, and Sushiro hurriedly wiped it away with his palm. Make her beautiful. Turn her into a woman so wonderful that I could never even hope to reach her. Please, I'm asking you. She absolutely needs you. That much I'm sure of. My intuition isn't wrong. Damn it, I still have my pride. I'm not about to eat some persimmon that's fallen to the ground. The young man couldn't bear the oppressive gloom any longer.
Until we meet again, may the stories of Japan inspire your days. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales.